โมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนัมมัสสามิ Blessings and good evening. The longer the coronavirus pandemic continues on, then it's not surprising many people feel frustrated with life. Some people want their money back. It's not what they thought it would be. Part of that frustration is frustrated desire to travel, go here, go there, do business, follow one's plans, one's wishes. One is unable to do that. So this is a good time, maybe never been a better time, to go traveling internally rather than trying to travel around the world, which is not very convenient at the moment. We go traveling internally, turn our attention inwards so that we learn about, understand our own body and mind better. The more we do that, the more we turn to pay attention to our own mind, the more we can learn about how suffering arises, stress, and what the truth of things is, what is what. There was one time, in the time of the Buddha, one of his relatives, Mahanama, was a monk who was already quite well practiced, I believe, a Sotapanna, stream winner already. But he was talking to the Buddha one day and asked him, what does the Noble One dwell in? What do they think about? What is the normal dwelling place of their mind? And the Buddha explained a little bit about what we call vihara Dhamma. Vihara, like you may know, in a Buddhist temple, monastery, the building where the monks live is called the vihara. So it's a bit like the word home. And a dwelling is a place you live, it's like a home. So the dwelling place of the mind, the Buddha explained to Mahanama, the dwelling place, the vihara Dhamma of the noble ones, are ones who have practiced, trained and realized the truth, at least the first stage of enlightenment, stream winners, or the second or third stage of enlightenment, once returners, non-returners. What do they dwell in? Well, they dwell in recollection, firstly, of the Buddha. Buddhanusati, they recollect the Buddha regularly. Your home or a dwelling place is that place you're familiar with. So here we're talking about the internal dwelling place of the mind, the heart. It's a place you're familiar with. Just like your ordinary home, if someone took you away from where your home is and dumped you somewhere in the city, a long way away, even though you might not know the area you've been dumped in, it wouldn't take long for you to start finding your way back home, following signposts, asking directions and so on, until you got closer to your home. You'd find all kinds of landmarks and things you recognize until you finally see your home and you go back there. because you're familiar with it. Your home is a place you go to every day or live in every day, and at the moment maybe you don't even leave it some days because of lockdown. So it's a place you're familiar with, you're used to. So Vihara Dhamma in terms of the mind, the heart, is the dwelling place you go back to regularly, frequently, and you get to know well, like your own home. In your home you know every room, every part of your home, you're used to it, you know it. So the noble ones, they have certain qualities of mind that they know, that they're familiar with, that they keep returning to. So the first one is the Buddhanusati, a recollection of the Buddha. The Buddha is our teacher. So anyone who's practiced the Buddhist path for a length of time, and you might imagine a noble one will have done that, well, they'll tend to have familiarity with their teacher, the person, and then the qualities that person embodies, and then the teachings they've heard, and probably have a certain amount of gratitude for the teacher. So then what happens, say, an Aryapugala, a noble one, hasn't yet completely purified their mind. So sometimes they still get thoughts of greed, anger, delusion arise. They're not finished with those things yet. They've already understood a certain amount of the path and experienced the Four Noble Truths, understand them to a certain level, but then still there are moments when the mind slips into greed or anger, delusion, and moments where mindfulness slips. So the Vihara Dhamma is where you bring your mind back to in order to let go of greed, anger, delusion, fear, worry, whatever it may be, anxiety. You go back to the Vihara Dhamma as soon as you realize that you've lost your mindfulness, that you've become caught into some form of attachment, greed, anger, fear, worry. So the noble one goes back, first of all, to recollecting the Buddha. They notice, oh, that was a moment of lust or greed or anger. It may just be literally a moment, but as soon as they recognize they've lost their mindfulness, they go back to Buddhanusati, recollecting the Buddha. Maybe simply bringing up that word, Buddho. This is how Ajahn Man, Ajahn Chah taught, to recollect the Buddha and recite the word Buddho over and over again as a meditation object. So when you lose that and you realize you've lost that, you go back to it. You're going back home, back to the dwelling place of the mind of a noble one. Because it's peaceful. And what the Buddha said is that thoughts of greed, anger, delusion disturb our mind. We lose our peace, our calm, our clarity. And the more you practice, the more you want a mind with peace, with calm, with clarity. So you go back to reciting Buddho or recollection of the Buddha, you regain that. And you stay there. Like at this time we're in lockdown, so we're spending a lot of time at home. So the noble ones spend a lot of time recollecting the Buddha. You might call it their default mode. When there's nothing else that they have to think about, they go back to thinking of the Buddha. Buddho, Buddho. If not the Buddha, then the Dhamma. In the same way, the noble one, if they get caught into greed, anger, delusion in any form, they go back to recollecting the Dhamma. And similarly the Sangha. Buddhanusati, Dhammanusati, Sanghanusati. We just chanted, in the evening chanting, we recollect Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. When you recollect the Sangha, we say that those who have practiced well, those who have practiced directly. Sometimes people ask, what does it mean, practicing directly? Well, this is exactly what it means. It means you're developing and maintaining a Vihara Dhamma, like the home of your mind. So if you get caught into thoughts of anxiety, once you recognize what's happening in your mind, mindfulness comes back, you go back to recollecting the Buddha, or the Dhamma, or the Sangha. That's the direct practice, because you're directly cutting off greed, anger and delusion. So you're freeing your mind from suffering right there in the present moment by bringing up Buddho, Dhammo, Sangho. And the Buddha said even if you don't recollect Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, you might recollect the qualities of devatas, devatanusati. And the main prime qualities of a deva are hiri-ottappa, we call the guardians of the world. Sense of shame based on understanding what is good and bad karma, and the mind that shrinks away from unwholesome intentions, volitions that would lead to making bad karma. And ottappa is a fear of the consequences of making bad karma. Devatas understand that. So one recollects devas, one is recollecting the quality of hiri-ottappa in the heart, bringing it up. So even though you still have maybe some greed, anger there, you're reflecting on it, recollecting and reflecting on it correctly to shrink away and abandon that unwholesome negative intention when it arises, when it's seen. So regularly, frequently recollecting the qualities of a deva. It's one of the practices of the noble ones. Another one is jakanusati. Jaka means giving up, giving away. So the practice of generosity, sacrifice for the good, the common good, or an individual, a person, or the Sangha, or the community. So the practice of charity, dana that one has done in the past. It's something that noble ones recollect. So vihara Dhamma, it's a dwelling place, it's like the home of the mind, recollecting the good that one has done in the past. That may lead on to the thought to do more good, to help others, practice more generosity in a material way, helping those in need, or giving Dhamma, sharing the teachings in one way or another. But recollecting chaka, remembering the qualities of giving, sharing, sacrificing for others. It's another thing that noble ones do. It's another part of their home. You could say these are different rooms in their home, their mental home. Recollecting the Buddha in one room, Dhamma in another, Sangha in another, Devatas in another, Chaka, the giving, the generosity in another. So even noble ones, if they're not yet arahant, they haven't reached nibbana, they will still have some defilements arise. Maybe they've abandoned the coarsest defilements that lead them to break precepts, to kill, steal, cheat on their partner and so on. The coarsest actions, unskillful actions have been abandoned. But they still may have moments where mindfulness lapses and the sense of self and attachment arises. But they quickly return home. It's like going out of the home, you lose mindfulness, and then they realize they've lost their mindfulness, they return home to one of these wholesome, skillful recollections. And that's obviously a sign that they practice those recollections regularly through their life, maybe for many years, who knows. They become familiar with these recollections. They become skilled in them and they become a part of them. So when we say vihara Dhamma, we mean dwelling place. It's just somewhere you naturally go to. For the ordinary unenlightened person, then they tend not to just go to recollection of the Buddha. They go to thinking about maybe things that bring them pleasure, fantasizing about their desires, the objects of their desires, or getting caught into the complaining negative mind. When they don't get what they want, they go to their default mode is, the negative mind, despair, disappointment, depression, frustration, anger. Or they're just caught into delusion all the time, wrong views and misunderstanding of the truth. Much of the time they're dwelling in thoughts of greed, anger and delusion. And so the experience of discontent and suffering is greater. So part of meditation is developing these skillful recollections. They're what we call anusati. Recollections. There's 10 skillful recollections that one can develop. In many ways, they're like themes to use the discursive thinking that we have. We all think and we all suffer with our thoughts. We attach to our thoughts too much, give them too much importance, believe them, get confused by them, disappointed by them. Anyone who's practiced meditation will complain that they're thinking too much or having the wrong kind of thoughts. Well, these 10 recollections are meditations that you can specifically bring up, whichever one they may be. You may find there's one that you particularly resonate with, and you use it as a theme to keep developing thoughts around that theme. The recollection of the Buddha, the Dhammasanga, Devatas, Cakanusati. Other ones are Gaya Gada Sati, recollection of the body, Marana Sati, recollection of death, Anapanasati. These are all recollections that are very wholesome ways to train the mind, developing skillful intentions and just bringing the Dhamma up in the mind and sometimes just thinking it through as a theme. So using information, teachings once heard, recollecting them over and over again, bringing them up, trying to understand them more deeply. Or sometimes just as a simple, what we call Bharikama meditation, where you just pick a word that represents that concept. So the word may be Buddha or Dhamma or Sangha. If it's the recollection of death, it's Maranang. We just chanted another chant, the chant on impermanence. You say, Jivitang me aniyatang, maranang me niyatang. My life is uncertain, my death is certain. That's a reflection or recollection of death. You might reduce that down to just the words. Death is certain, life is uncertain, or Maranang, maranang, or maranang me niyatang. That's a recollection of death. Sometimes the Buddha would ask the monks, how often do you recollect death? Venerable Ananda was at the end of his life. Venerable Ananda was assistant monk, and he appears a lot in the suttas and commentaries because he was the one who remembered what the Buddha taught. And so he played a vital role memorizing the suttas and being there to support and help the Buddha, particularly right at the end of his life. But he also came in for criticism sometimes, or was featured in stories and so on, recollections of that time. And so they say the Buddha once turned to Ananda and said, how often do you recollect death? And he said, 7 times a day. And the Buddha said, not enough, Ananda. The Tathagata, the Buddha, recollects death every breath in, every breath out, constantly aware of the impermanence, the unpredictability of life. So these recollections, skillful recollections, we can bring up over and over again. through our day, through our life, both to bring up mindfulness and also to develop skillful, wise themes that educate the mind. Rather than thinking about what's wrong with your life, what's wrong with the world, and the negativity that we get caught into, one brings the mind to recollect something skillful, like the Buddha or the Dhamma or the Sangha, rather than always fantasizing about what you want from the world, from life, our ambitions, our desires, which are the basis for all our disappointments and frustrations as well. One recollects something wholesome like Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, or the impermanence of life, or the qualities of a deva. Say if you're getting caught into endlessly scheming and planning how to seek revenge on people you don't like, go back to Devadanussati. Fools rush in where angels fear to tread. The devas, they recognize the harm of making bad karma, seeking revenge on people, even if people have hurt us or annoyed us, or caused us trouble. Seeking revenge only worsens the situation, makes more bad karma for ourselves. So developing the quality of hiriyottappa, and so on. These recollections are both developing right view, right understanding of the way things are, as well as improving our mindfulness. Sometimes they're a way into meditation, like they say, when you practice Buddhanussati, you recite Buddho, and you get to a point where the mind is calm, still with the recollection. Mindfulness is steady, then piti, rapture, sukha, happiness arises, and the factors of samadhi arise. And it may lead to a point where the recitation of the word, Buddho or Dhammo, or whatever the word is you're using, disappears, because the mind has become unified in one pointed on its object, with this presence of mind. So samadhi, the factors of samadhi arise, so the word, the object, disappears. Generally one takes up the breath as an object then, because the breath is quite a refined meditation object. Just to find your breath, it's a subtle feeling, can be quite difficult for many people, especially in the beginning of meditation. So if one uses a theme of meditation such as recollection of the Buddha, that prepares the mind, and then when the mind becomes more steady and stable, the breath becomes more prominent, and quite naturally it becomes prominent. When Buddha disappears, or what else can you turn to as an object? Well, the breath is a very natural object to turn to at that point. It's more subtle. After a while, words and thoughts are too much, they're too coarse for the mind. As the mindfulness improves, as the factors of samadhi come up, then the mind just wants to take the knowing of the breath. And so one uses these 10 recollections to lead into the mindfulness of the breath. And the Buddha taught us to put effort into developing samadhi so that we can develop some of this vihara Dhamma, the dwelling place of the mind on the inside. Because that's where we find a lot of mental stability, balances our emotions, because we're always getting caught into our emotional reactions to the world, to what we experience through our senses, and whatever's going on in the world, good or bad, we tend to react to it with excitement and desire or aversion or fear. But the practice of developing samadhi helps to balance our emotions, maintain a steadiness, stability of mind as mindfulness becomes more continuous. And this is laying the foundation for deeper understanding, what you might call vipassana, and developing insight into the true nature of things. Because normally our mind is just so fickle, it's jumping around from moment to moment, from emotion to emotion. One moment thinking this and reacting, one moment thinking that, reacting. We're either reacting to what's coming to us from the outside, when you interact with other people and the world, or else even if you're on your own and meditating quietly, we tend to react with desire and attraction or aversion to even just to our own memories and thoughts that come up, or to feelings in the body. As the day wears on, the body tends to get more worn out, more tired, so then it's harder to maintain mindfulness, isn't it? If you sit meditation at this time of night, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, it's hard to sit still. You see people moving around all the time in their meditation because the body is giving them some pressure or some painful feelings. So we need to balance the emotions and that tendency just to react with pleasure or aversion to our experience. And mindfulness and training in mindfulness does that. And it also brings up the more refined pleasure of samadhi, so piti, rapture, sukha, the happiness of the mind. Brings up a sense of wellness, well-being, and fullness of mind. Just as food fills the body, piti and sukha fill the mind up. But they can become distractions themselves in the practice. Piti is quite stimulating. So as we become more mindful, and whether it's just hearing the Dhamma or meditating on a theme of Dhamma, as the mind becomes more wholesome, then it's very common for people to feel waves of rapture, hair standing on end, tingling, tears of joy and rapture, waves of rapture. Sometimes even if somebody's mindfulness is not very strong, they have some mindfulness but it's not complete yet, then they might experience the feelings of spinning, or the whole body seems to be moving back and forth or shaking. So although these are what we call factors of samadhi, the mind calming down and mindfulness becoming more continuous, these can still be obstacles that we get caught up on or doubt about. And rapture can become exciting for the mind, so people can experience some rapture and then they want to go and talk to the rest of the world and tell them how good the Dhamma is because of the rapture. They become excited by it, attached to it. They want more of it. It becomes another form of desire. I need my rapture, almost like a drug. I need my rapture. If I don't have my rapture, then I feel flat. It means my meditation is no good, my life is no good. Obviously, when you experience rapture, there are physical changes in the body, like endorphins and chemical changes in the brain and maybe in the whole body. The bliss can come up quite strongly as a physical as well as a mental feeling. So that can form a basis for attachment. One can get lost in it, one can crave it. So the Buddha encouraged us to press on with our practice and not to give too much importance to these things, to notice them but then let them go again. And keep focusing the mindfulness on the meditation object, whether it's recollection of the Buddha, or if one becomes very quiet and in a more refined state of samadhi, then the breath perhaps. But to keep bringing the mind back to the present moment and letting go even of feelings of rapture, joy, bliss that arise, moving towards what we call ekakata citta, the mind that is one-pointed or unified. And you'll find if you keep practicing, there are times where the mind does seem to come together, it unifies in one place. All one's mental energy becomes very stable, firm in one place. And if that continues, then we say one achieves a sort of unshakable peace, where the mind is equanimous, at least to one level, or at least on one level, it's equanimous. not easily shaken. So at that moment, it's no longer shaken by the bliss or the rapture, no longer shaken by thoughts that are arising. The mind just becomes very subtle and content to be with one object, just knowing one object. So it becomes equanimous. And this is a quality we have to keep developing, because it's the mind that can then know the Dhamma, know the truth. And when we experience more equanimity and for longer periods, it gives us the chance to contemplate our own experience, to observe, to know experience without getting lost in it. So one may achieve some equanimity, and then we say we can turn to contemplate our experience of body and mind. As long as that equanimity is there, then one can experience a thought arising, passing away, but just know it without getting involved with it. It's a quality of mind, if it becomes very well established, they call it the internal witness. The technical term is, Lumpur Man uses titiputang. Ajahn Chah used to say sikiputo, which many people think is the same Pali word, slightly different Pali words, but referring to the same quality, just the internal witness, the knower of experience, where the mind is equanimous and able to discern particularly the three characteristics of anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not self. Because one needs to have that ability to be equanimous so that one can look at experience without getting caught up in it. And why do we get caught up into our thoughts and emotions and the body? It's because of either love or hate, attraction or aversion. But when the mind is equanimous with mindfulness, one can look on with clarity of awareness and see the way things are better. So the internal witness is where the mind is really just seeing things without adding on any extra perceptions based on desire, fear, greed, anger, delusion. It's just knowing from a place of calm, quietness. It's undisturbed, unshakable. And this is a quality we have to keep developing out of these vihara dhammas, these wholesome states that the mind is cultivating. We bring the mind to this place of equanimity and well-being so it can really contemplate experience and know it as it is. It's like, when there's a legal case, they're always looking for a good witness who really can speak about the truth, the facts, without bias. Or if you've ever been involved in a car accident and there's two parties and there's some damage or injury or something, and then the police come along, they're always looking for a witness, an impartial witness to events, so that they can get some kind of statement that says, well, what happened, without siding with one side or the other. It's very difficult in the world because everybody's got their bias and prejudice, but when you turn your mind to the inner world of samadhi, then it does experience the mind that is objective, unprejudiced, and can just witness the way things are. So it can see a thought as a thought, arising, ceasing. And we have a chance to actually see craving arise. Craving is the cause of attachment, is the cause of suffering. Where does craving come from? It comes from avijja, unawareness, not knowing. But when you develop samadhi, you're bringing the mind to the state of knowing. With this state of knowing, one can investigate the truth and see the way it is more clearly. So then you can see a thought as impermanent. What's impermanent is not a self, it's just a thought. Why do we suffer so much? Because we attach so much importance to every thought, every view, every belief and opinion, every feeling, every emotion. We have this sense of self forming all the time, and we get caught up in that, and then we get suffering. We get disappointment, we get despair, we get confusion. But the internal witness is just seeing and knowing the way things are. It's seeing from a place of peace and stability. It's not easily shaken. Of course, it may degenerate after a while. You lose the witness and you're back with the biases of the mind, the loves and hates. And then you have to recognize that, and like the Buddha was teaching Mahanama, that monk, go back to the place of the abiding place, the dwelling place of the mind. Go back to the reciting Buddha or Dhamma or Sangha. Re-establish mindfulness. Get back closer to this state where there's just the witness, knowing experience rather than getting lost in it. Luang Por Chah said, when you reach this point where you reach the mind that is just witnessing things rather than getting caught up, he said, contemplate the body. Come to see the body clearly as it is, as a combination of natural physical elements, but there's no self in there. It's not a person or a being. It's a collection of earth, air, fire and water. Contemplate that. He said, contemplate it until you can see the skeleton in your own body or skeletons in the people around you. Meaning you can see the impermanence of this body. You can know this body is impermanent. It's not a lasting self. It's just the same as a vehicle. You use a vehicle for a while and then it falls apart, breaks down. This body, you use it for a while and then it gets old and breaks up and falls apart. In practice to the point where you're seeing the skeleton in your own body, so you're not deluded by this body, thinking of it as a self that will go on forever and ever, and you can keep seeking more pleasure, more experiences with it based on your craving, your attachment. That's the way that leads to more despair, more suffering. The more attachment we have, the more we suffer. When we bring the mind to this point inside of the internal witness, where the mind is calm, alert, peaceful, mindful, it can just witness the true nature of this body that is impermanent. It doesn't last, and you can't stop it from aging, getting sick or dying. So when the mind is in this state of samadhi, it can be taught very well. You can teach the mind, point out the truth to it, and the mind will start to accept it, recognize, oh, that's true. Half the time we practice, the mind is resisting the truth. It says, yeah, it makes sense, but I don't really want it yet. I don't want the Dhamma yet. I don't want the peaceful mind on the inside yet. I still want a bit more of the world. I want to taste the world some more. I'm not finished with it. That's craving, isn't it? Craving is never satisfied. So the Buddha said, you have to look at the way you attach to the world. You attach the world like a royal chariot. In those days it was a royal chariot. These days it would be a Lamborghini, whatever the make of car is that you particularly like, Rolls Royce. I don't know, I can't remember the names of cars, it's been so long, but it's not a royal chariot, but it's something, or maybe a super yacht. If you're a billionaire and you've got a super yacht, that's the new royal chariot standard. And people who are unenlightened, deluded with the world, they look at the royal chariot or the super yacht and it blinds them with desire. Oh, that's good. What a beautifully decorated or painted super yacht or beautiful sports car, whatever it is. But the one who's practiced mindfulness and learned to contemplate, they're not fooled anymore. They don't cling to the super yacht or the Lamborghini. They just know anicca, dukkha, anatta. Because they found something much more valuable, the inner witness, this inner space in the mind that can hold attention and really examine the truth of things. In the end, we have to say whether it's a rubber dinghy or a super yacht, it's still impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. And the more I practice, the more I can see if I did have a super yacht, it'd be a lot of cleaning and maintenance, so I'm quite happy not having one. The more you have to look after. Well, this internal witness is like your dwelling place, and that doesn't cost anything, and you don't have to sweep it out and vacuum it and maintain it and mend it. It's just about bringing attention inwards and developing these wholesome qualities, the dwelling place of the mind. The true Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, they're internal qualities that we develop through mindfulness. And the more your mind dwells with Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha on the inside, the safer you are, the more peaceful you are. I think this is what the Buddha was getting to with Mahanama. He's saying you develop these dwelling places for the mind as your default dwelling place, where your thinking goes to more and more. If you don't train, you don't practice, well, the mind goes out to what the world has on offer more and more. So you're always thinking about what more you can get, what you want, your little pleasures, your big pleasures, your aversions and pet hates. You're thinking about all that stuff most of the time. Now we have to change it around and go to the skillful dwelling place of the mind more and more. That's what the Buddha was encouraging. So I encourage you all to find this inner witness, the inner dwelling place of the mind. And that's where you can find some true freedom from lockdown, restrictions, pandemics, armed conflicts, all the problems of the world, of life. The real place of freedom is inside, going inside and letting go of the world. So I'll wish that for you. May you find lots of inner freedom and lots of letting go of attachment, because I think this will bring you more and more happiness. So I'll leave you with that as a final thought tonight.